The billionaire's body hit the ground with a heavy thud. Everyone froze. His girlfriend screamed and dropped her wine glass. The red liquid spilled across the white carpet like blood. The housekeeper didn't scream. She didn't gasp. She didn't move an inch. Her eyes stayed fixed on the glass the man had just drunk from. Her fingers tightened around the tray in her hands. She knew something. Seconds earlier, he had been laughing, joking, toasting to another deal. Then, just like that, he clutched his chest and collapsed. His girlfriend was crying now, shaking him, yelling his name. But the housekeeper stood still. Her lips parted slowly. "Call an ambulance," she said, voice steady. "Now." The butler reached for his phone. The guests were in shock. All eyes turned to the housekeeper, because something in her face said this wasn't an accident. This was planned, and she knew who did it. Now everything was about to change. Subscribe for more emotional or shocking stories. Grace had worked in that house for 12 years. 12 quiet, humble years. She swept the floors, polished the silver, cleaned the rooms no one thanked her for. She knew every corner of that mansion, every crack in the tile, every squeaky step. But what she knew most was people. And lately, one person stood out. Chantel, the girlfriend. She showed up 8 months ago, all glam and charm, too young, too smooth, too interested in things that had nothing to do with love. Mr. Dalton, the billionaire, was smitten. She made him laugh again. She touched his hand in front of everyone, and he smiled like a boy. But Grace had seen women like her before. She watched Chantel fake kindness to the staff. She watched her snoop through Mr. Dalton's study when he wasn't home. She even saw her slip something in his tea once, just a dash of powder from a tiny container. That's when Grace began paying closer attention. She didn't say anything. Not yet. Because in a house like this, accusations had to come with proof. But her heart told her, this woman wasn't here for love. She was here for the money, and maybe something worse. Grace remembered the first real warning sign. It was a Sunday morning. She had entered the study to dust the bookshelves, just like always. But something felt off. The air smelled strange, sweet, but sharp, like a perfume trying to hide something bitter. Mr. Dalton had just stepped out for a meeting. Chantel said she was going to take a nap upstairs, but Grace found her in the study. She wasn't napping. She was kneeling by the safe, her hands moving quickly, like she had done it before. Chantel looked up, startled. "Oh, I was just looking for a pen," she said, laughing nervously. Grace said nothing. She nodded, then went on dusting, but she knew Chantel was lying. From that day, Grace started watching quietly. She began noting little things. Chantel's sudden interest in Mr. Dalton's schedule, the new phone she kept hidden in her purse, the way she always insisted on serving his drinks herself, the way she smiled, too much, too wide, every time Mr. Dalton mentioned his will. Grace didn't say anything to him. Not yet. He looked happy for the first time in years. He believed in love again. Who was she to ruin that? But she began preparing. She learned about poisons, about symptoms, about how most were undetectable in small amounts. She started carrying a charcoal powder mix in her apron pocket, just in case. She hoped she'd never have to use it. Then one night, Grace overheard something that shook her. Chantel was on the phone. She didn't know Grace was nearby, hidden behind the door with a basket of folded linens. "He's signing the paper next week," Chantel whispered. "No, he has no clue. After that, it's just one glass." One glass. Grace didn't sleep that night. She paced her tiny room in the back wing of the house, praying she had heard wrong, praying she was just paranoid. But the next night, during the dinner party, when Chantel insisted on pouring the wine, Grace's heart sank. She watched as Mr. Dalton laughed, raised his glass, and drank, and a few seconds later, he collapsed. The screaming started. The shock spread. But Grace didn't freeze. She moved. She rushed forward, examined the wine glass, sniffed it, and ran straight to the kitchen. She mixed the charcoal powder with water and hurried back. She tilted his head and helped him drink it, forcing it past his lips while Chantel stood frozen, fake tears forming. Within minutes, Mr. Dalton began to stir. His breathing steadied, but he was still unconscious. Grace stood up slowly. She turned to Chantel. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Grace knew. Chantel knew she had been caught. The paramedics arrived 5 minutes later. Grace stepped aside as they rushed in with their equipment. She watched closely, hands still stained from the black charcoal mix she had used to save her boss's life. Mr. Dalton was breathing again, but still unconscious. The medics worked fast, attaching monitors, checking his pulse, lifting him gently onto the stretcher. All the while, Chantel kept up the act. She cried loudly. She grabbed one medic's arm and said, "Please, do something. He just collapsed." But her hands weren't shaking. Her eyes didn't look worried. They looked angry. Grace noticed it all. "Ma'am," one of the medics said to Grace, "you gave him activated charcoal?" She nodded. The medic paused. He exchanged a look with his partner. "You might have saved his life," he said quietly. "If it's poison, this bought us time." They wheeled Mr. Dalton out. His guests stood frozen, whispering among themselves. Most didn't know what had happened. Some assumed a heart attack. Others looked to Grace for answers. But Grace said nothing. Not yet. She followed the stretcher to the door. When she turned back, Chantel was staring at her. A glare, cold, sharp, dangerous. Grace's spine stiffened, but she didn't back down. Instead, she walked to Mr. Dalton's study. She picked up the cordless house phone, and she dialed. The voice on the other end was calm and deep. "Detective Ross, this is Grace Okoye," she said firmly. "I need to report a suspected poisoning, attempted murder. The victim is Alan Dalton." There was a pause. "Where are you calling from?" the detective asked. "His home," she replied. "I'm his housekeeper. I've been watching someone, his girlfriend. She's dangerous. I have details." "Stay put," the detective said. "We're on our way." Grace hung up. When she stepped back into the living room, Chantel was gone. Panic tightened in Grace's chest. She rushed through the mansion, checking the stairs, the kitchen, the garden doors. Gone. Chantel had vanished. And Grace knew exactly what that meant. She wasn't going to the hospital. She was running. Grace didn't waste time. She went to Mr. Dalton's office, opened the drawer he always kept locked, and pulled out the flash drive she had hidden there days ago. She had copied security footage. She had voice recordings. She had receipts. She had seen this coming. She just never thought it would happen so soon. Now, it was her word against a woman who nearly got away with murder. But Grace wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had saved his life. Now she would say his name. The sun had barely risen when Grace arrived at the hospital. She had stayed awake the entire night, not out of fear, out of duty. The moment she walked into the ICU waiting room, a nurse recognized her and waved her in. Mr. Dalton was stable, resting, but unconscious. "Is he going to make it?" Grace asked softly. The nurse nodded. "Thanks to you." But that wasn't enough for Grace. She needed justice. Detective Ross arrived 30 minutes later. He was tall, dark-skinned, with gray at his temples and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He walked in calmly, holding a notebook, but he wasn't smiling. He took Grace into a quiet room. She sat, her back straight, holding the flash drive in her hand. "I've got everything," she said before he even asked. Camera footage, sound from her phone calls, even photos of her searching Mr. Dalton's safe. He raised an eyebrow. "I knew she was planning something," Grace said. "I've been watching her. She poisoned him last night. That drink wasn't just wine." Detective Ross nodded slowly. He took the flash drive, inserted it into his laptop. As the files opened, the room filled with images. Chantel pouring something into Mr. Dalton's whiskey. Chantel whispering into the phone, "Once he's gone, the will kicks in." The evidence was damning. "Why didn't you report this sooner?" he asked. "I didn't want to be wrong," she said quietly. "Black women like me? We don't get believed that easily, especially against someone like her. So I waited. I watched. I prayed I was wrong." He looked at her, his eyes softening just a little. "But you weren't wrong," he said. "No, and now she's running. We'll find her," he promised. "And when we do, this footage will bury her." A few hours later, the news broke. Billionaire Alan Dalton poisoned. Police launch manhunt for girlfriend. Grace watched the headlines scroll across the screen in the hospital lobby. Reporters gathered outside. Security guards kept them back. The world was starting to know the truth. Still, Grace didn't care about fame. She only cared about Mr. Dalton opening his eyes. And when he finally did, hours later, blinking up at the white ceiling, Grace was the first person he saw. His voice was weak. "Grace?" She smiled, tears in her eyes. "You're safe, sir," she whispered. "I've got you." He looked confused. "What happened?" "You were poisoned," she said softly, "by Chantel." His eyes widened, his lips trembled. "She tried to kill me?" "Yes." He swallowed hard. "You saved me?" Grace nodded. He turned his head slightly, then said three words that changed everything. You saved everything, Bing. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Police had been in and out since dawn, searching for clues, collecting fingerprints, and securing anything that might help in court. Chantel was still missing. Her phone was off, her credit cards inactive. But Grace knew she was out there somewhere, watching, waiting, planning her next move. Grace sat in the kitchen, staring at a cup of untouched tea. Her hands trembled just a little. It wasn't fear. It was the weight of everything she had carried for so long. 12 years of silence, 12 years of loyalty. And for the first time, her loyalty had been the only thing standing between life and death. A soft knock came at the kitchen door. It was Mr. Dalton's lawyer, Mr. Hemsworth. An old man with silver hair, thick glasses, and a voice that always sounded like it was reading from a legal contract. "May I sit?" he asked. Grace nodded. "I came to thank you," he said. "You may have saved Alan's life and his legacy." She gave a small smile. "Just did what was right." "No," he said firmly. "You did more than that. You risked everything, and now it's time he knows exactly who you are." Grace looked confused. "What do you mean?" Mr. Hemsworth reached into his bag and pulled out a large envelope. He slid it across the table. "I need you to read this," he said. Grace opened it slowly. Inside were several documents, legal papers signed and stamped, a new will, a sealed letter with her name on it. She opened the letter. Her eyes moved across the page, slowly at first, then faster. Her lips parted. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Alan changed his will last month," the lawyer explained, "after you told him Chantel was moving too fast, after he remembered who always stood by his side." The letter was simple but powerful. In it, Mr. Dalton thanked Grace for her faithfulness, for her integrity, for always protecting his home, his peace, and his heart. He called her family, and he had made it official. "She doesn't know this," the lawyer continued. "But even if Chantel had succeeded, she wouldn't have inherited anything. You're the legal heir to 60% of his estate." Grace couldn't speak. Her hand trembled as she put the letter down. "But I'm just a housekeeper," she whispered. "No," Mr. Hemsworth said. "You're the woman who saved a life. You're the reason the Dalton legacy still stands. And now you're part of that legacy." Tears welled up in Grace's eyes. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the house. It was the recognition. After so many years of being invisible, she had finally been seen. Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window in her tiny room above the garage, the same room she had lived in for 12 years. The moonlight poured in, soft and quiet, as if the world was trying not to disturb her thoughts. Her mind replayed everything: the laughter, the poison, the moment she shouted at the dinner table, the police, the lawyer's words, the letter in her hands. Every part of her wanted to scream, cry, laugh, but all she did was breathe. She didn't know how to feel. It still didn't feel real. The next day, Mr. Dalton woke up for the first time in 3 days. Weak, pale, but alive. The doctors called it a miracle. Grace called it justice. He asked for her immediately. She walked slowly into his room, not sure what to say. He looked at her with tired eyes. But there was something in them: gratitude, pain, respect. "They told me what you did," he whispered. Grace looked down. "I only did what anyone should do." "No," he said, shaking his head gently. "Most people would have walked away. You stepped in." A tear slipped down his cheek. "I trusted the wrong woman," he said, "and I nearly died for it. But I thank God you were here. You always were." He reached for her hand. "Grace," he said, his voice cracking, "you're not just my housekeeper. You're my guardian angel." She smiled through tears. "You don't owe me anything, sir." He chuckled softly. "I owe you everything." Weeks passed. Chantel was found hiding in a motel under a fake name. She was arrested without a fight. In court, she confessed to the plan. She admitted she poisoned him slowly, hoping he'd fall ill enough for her to get access to his fortune. But her plan fell apart the moment Grace exposed her. Grace stood in the courtroom, silent but strong, as the judge read out Chantel's sentence: 18 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. It wasn't just a win for Mr. Dalton. It was a win for every quiet woman who had ever been underestimated. The media went wild. Headlines read, "Billionaire's housekeeper saves his life." "Loyalty exposes deadly plot." "Unlikely hero, how Grace stopped a murder." Reporters begged her for interviews. TV shows offered her money. She turned them all down. Grace wasn't looking for fame. She just wanted peace. And that's what Mr. Dalton gave her. He didn't just change his will. He gave her a new house, a beautiful home not far from the mansion. He told her she never had to work again. But Grace, she stayed, not as a housekeeper, but as the woman who helped rebuild a broken man's life, as the woman who turned her quiet strength into a fortress of protection, as family. Months later, the mansion no longer felt the same, not because of fear, because of freedom. Mr. Dalton had changed. He moved slower now, appreciated things more. He no longer filled his days with meetings or parties. He spent time in the garden. He wrote letters to people he hadn't spoken to in years. He smiled more, genuine smiles, not the polished ones he used to give at business dinners. And Grace? Grace finally took time for herself. She painted again, something she hadn't done since she was a girl. She joined a local women's group, sharing her story in private, quiet ways. She even traveled to Jamaica to visit her mother's grave, something she'd always postponed because of work. The mansion was quiet but peaceful. One morning, Mr. Dalton called for Grace. She entered the lounge, and he was sitting there with a lawyer and a sealed envelope. "What is this?" she asked. He smiled. "Just one last thank you." The lawyer handed her the envelope. Inside was a legal deed to half the company. Grace froze. "I don't want it," she said quickly. "I didn't save you for money." "I know," Mr. Dalton replied. "That's why you deserve it." She couldn't speak. He continued. "You didn't just save my life, Grace. You saved my soul. This is just a piece of paper. What you gave me can't be repaid." The lawyer left. They sat together, quiet, watching the sun rise. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. Respect. Trust. Family. Grace had walked into that house 12 years ago with a mop and a bucket. She now stood as a woman who changed a life, stopped a murder, and reminded the world that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear aprons. Thank you for listening to this powerful story. If it moved you, inspired you, or made you think, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who believes in everyday heroes. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave,